But we're just going to talk about the quarterback play that we saw unfold on Sunday. A lot of low yardage totals, but more importantly, Colin, let's zoom into two games. Daniel Jones and the Giants, and then Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns. Let's start with Danny Dimes. These numbers are coming out since inking that 4-year, $160 million contract. He's played in 7 games. 7 games after dealing with a neck and a knee injury. He's thrown 2 touchdowns and he's thrown 8 interceptions, but 3 of those have been pick sixes. So he's thrown more touchdowns to the opposition than he has to his own team. This contract looks worse by the game. It's not getting any prettier. And for Danny Dimes, I mean, that's just a miscalculation on the Giants' part.
Yeah, he was just atrocious on Sunday, and there's really no other way to put it. This Vikings defense got a lot better in the offseason. They did, but they're not the juggernaut force that they were, 2, 3, 4 years ago with the Danielle Hunters, Anthony Barrs, Eric Kendricks of the world, Harrison Smith in the secondary. They're not that team anymore, and the issue with the Giants is that they couldn't get established doing anything at any point. They don't have a running back anymore, right? Saquon Barkley's gone. Devin Singletary, Tyrone Tracy are handling the duties in the backfield. That doesn't establish enough to give Daniel Jones anything in the play-action game or pre-snap motion or whatever it is to open things up for him. He has that alpha wide receiver in Malik Nabers. And if you break down the film of this game, George, I looked into it just a little bit. Malik Nabers was wide open the majority of the time. He was being double-teamed the majority of the time, and he was getting in and out of cuts, and he was getting open, even with that being the case. And I think the key issue here with the Giants is that they kind of have backed themselves into a corner, not as much as the Cleveland Browns, which we'll talk about in just a second. But, this is same old for New York. I was looking on social media on Sunday, and it was go get Ryan Tannehill, go get someone, go trade for Jameis Winston, who is, coincidentally on the Cleveland Browns. So it's not going to get any better for this Giants team. Maybe, when they face the Washington Commanders of the world, when they face a defense that isn't going to give them too much trouble. Maybe Daniel Jones has time to wind up for Nabers or find, Wan'Dale Robinson or whoever it is. But at this point, I can't really see a realistic scenario where this Giants team wins a ton of games because they don't have an offense. They got diced by Sam Darnold defensively. So what do they have going on? This contract is looking, like you said, George, worse by the day.
They went in, and this was a contract, basically. They gave it to Daniel Jones, 4 years, $160 million. They're stuck with him this year. After next year, Colin, they're going to cut him. They'll save $19 million against the cap. That's $19 more million they'd have right now. He is due $47 million guaranteed this season. If they cut him, it would cost them another $22 million to not play. Now, you look at a team like the Denver Broncos that was like, we'll eat $85 million to get Russell Wilson the heck out of here, and that's fine. Basically, what Joe Shane and Brian Daboll are doing this season is he's only played 7 games since we paid him. We revamped the offensive line, which it was playing well in their debut on Sunday, right? Illuminor at right tackle, Andrew Thomas at left tackle. Yeah, they were credited with sacks, but a lot of those fell on Daniel Jones and running into sacks. Part of it, a sack, a pressure is not always the offensive lineman's fault. Part of it is being a quarterback that has the IQ and has the anticipation to know how to avoid pressure and navigate in the pocket. That falls on Daniel Jones. He will be benched by October. If this type of play continues for the next 3-4 games, he's going to be benched for Drew Lock. But no matter what, this is a Giants franchise that needs to figure out what they have in Daniel Jones, but I think everyone can see what they do, and that is a guy that is not a starting quarterback. Maybe give him a change of scenery. Maybe that would work out. But no matter what, they had to revamp this offensive line. So even you bring up talking about how they have David Singletary, they don't have someone that's dynamic like Saquon Barkley. If they paid Saquon Barkley and they kept him, what would they have lost by? 28-6 was the final. Maybe they'll lose 28-10, but no matter what, Daniel Jones still looks lost out there. And if they paid Saquon Barkley, they don't have this offensive line. The Giants are trying to move forward. They invested in their defensive line. They got that checked off. From one game, we'll see how they look over 17 games. The offensive line looks improved and looks serviceable, so cool. Box check there. Malik Nabers averaged 13 yards a catch on 7 targets, looked great. You have your wide receiver. They need a quarterback, and they need a cornerback. They have 3 of the top 5 most important positions in football checked off. This is a team in a rebuild. If Daniel Jones continues to execute like this, which I think he will, they're going to move on from him, and the Giants will be in line for a Carson Beck, who's QB1, coming up in this draft. We'll see how he grows in Georgia. If not a Carson Beck, could it be a Quinn Ewers? Could it be a Shedeur Sanders? We'll see how he can handle New York media, and especially with his dad. But these are the options. That's where the Giants are at. This Daniel Jones contract is no doubt about it, though, absolutely awful. He can't make reads. He's not anticipating plays. And with his athletic upside, like, he should thrive in a system like Brian Daboll's. But he's just bad.
Yep.
So that's just a reconfirmation. I think it's 2 or 3 more games. And if he continues like this, then he's going to get benched. They put in Drew Lock and they move on. Because even the questions are of who else could have been that backup quarterback. They needed to use this offseason to invest in the offensive line, get that sorted out. Because if they didn't and they brought in Carson Beck, it's the same thing of why I say you don't play Drake May yet. Let's figure out these 5 guys up front. If they're good, then you play them. If they bring in Carson Beck, it would be the same thing over again where he would be broken because you can't protect him. You have to look out for your quarterback, Colin. And the Giants are looking out for the quarterback of the future, the next one, by what they did with this offensive line.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that the thing about Daniel Jones's contract that is so interesting to me is that when he signed the big deal, I think the kind of prevailing narrative was like, does Daniel Jones deserve this money yet? And the hope, obviously, both in New York and, in NFL circles at large, was that, okay, he'll develop into the guy for the New York Giants. And he had those flash games in his early seasons. I remember, a game, I think it was against Tampa Bay. He led a comeback and it was like, Daniel Jones is the guy of the future, the whole Vanilla Vic situation, whatever it is. And then you kind of realize that he can't make reads. He's kind of like Justin Fields without the pure athleticism of Justin Fields, which is that he laser focuses on that first read. And if that guy's not open, he tucks the ball and runs, usually right into a defender, and gets sacked or gets tackled for a gain of 1 or a loss of 2, whatever it is. So and the thing about Daniel Jones is that he's not a rookie quarterback anymore. He should be more seasoned.
He was drafted in 2019.
Exactly. I remember I was still learning how to drive when Daniel Jones got drafted. So this was so long ago. This is not a guy that you can give the benefit of the doubt anymore. You can't extend that leash any longer than it's been extended. And you could argue that it's been extended too long already for Daniel Jones. But I think you're absolutely right. They're building around him. The pieces outside of, the running back position are there. And obviously on defense, like you mentioned. So this Giants team could be good in a couple of years. But, they really set themselves back with this pick of Daniel Jones and with this contract for Jones, is that they've set them back a couple of years. They've allowed a team like the Eagles to develop a Jalen Hurts into a pure weapon and one of the best in the NFL and build that team into what could be a Super Bowl caliber, Super Bowl winning team this year and potentially next year now with Saquon Barkley. So they've allowed teams around them to lap them in this field, and it doesn't look like it's going to get better anytime soon because they're going to have to reset this development cycle of a rookie quarterback.
And this is a team still trying to get out from under what David Gettleman did to them with awful draft picks, awful contracts. And if you remember back to 2019 when Daniel Jones was drafted, Justin Herbert was the guy. That was who was projected for the Giants to select in that draft. He decides to go back one more year at Oregon. That shakes it up. They end up with Dimes. Chargers get Herbert. And it's all from there. Daniel Jones credited with allowing 3 sacks, 1 QB hit, and 3 pressures. The offensive line for the Giants played well. It was all on Danny Dimes. Our second worst contract. I think this is the worst, actually. Let's talk about Deshaun Watson. I would say it's the worst acquisition in NFL history. We all know what happened where 3 years ago, Deshaun Watson coming off of being traded from the Texans because of all those allegations of sexual assault where he couldn't play for the Texans. You couldn't keep him. But the Browns were so desperate to have a quarterback that the Haslams and all their dumb wisdom, yes, I'm saying dumb wisdom there. I don't care if it makes sense because what they decided to do did not make sense. They traded 3 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and a 4th-round pick for Deshaun Watson, and they gave him a 5-year, 100% guaranteed $230 million contract. And since they've made that acquisition, he has played 13 games. And he has completed 59% of his passes, 15 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. Of course, Deshaun Watson, prior trade, was a top 5 quarterback at the position. But between his last game with the Texans and his first game with the Browns, 700 days on the dot passed of him not playing football. In that first season, he was in Cleveland. You go, okay, that's a guy that has to shake the rust. It's not at that point. It's now the 3rd season. He looks terrible. Neither of his starting tackles were playing. Neither of them were healthy. But Deshaun Watson can't complete a pass further than 15 yards down the field, looks lost, is turning the ball over. And when you look at what Cleveland did to give him a 100% guaranteed contract while giving those draft picks, even look at this for Houston, Cullen. Those draft picks, some of them became Tank Dell, Will Anderson, Damian Pierce, Kalen Bullock, Kenyon Green. Those are 5 starters for the Houston Texans. With those 3 first-round picks alone, that's Will Anderson. Like, that's what they turned him into. And, of course, the Texans were put in a situation where they now have C.J. Stroud, who could be one of the best in the league one day. This was an awful contract from the Browns the second they gave it to Watson because it was 100% guaranteed, but also just how dumb it was where Dak Prescott just got paid, right, Colin? And he got $240 million total value. He got $231 million guaranteed. He just eclipsed Deshaun Watson by $1 million. Deshaun was paid 3 years ago. This contract is awful every way you look at it, and then you watch him on the field, and it looks even worse. The Browns are going to pay for this for years to come for the same reason of, again, it's 100% guaranteed. They got 2 years left where they're stuck with him. They're stuck paying him. It's never going to get any better for the Browns. It is awful how bad he's looked, and it was just an awful decision by the ownership of the Cleveland Browns, the Haslam family, to give him this contract. And honestly, Colin, just to make that trade in the first place, because of the allegations he was facing, everyone knew what he was dealing with, and they said, we don't care. We're going to trade for him because we think his ability on the field is worth it. It wasn't worth it, in my opinion, and karma came back around because his ability on the field never returned once he landed with the Browns.
Yeah, for Deshaun Watson to work in the scenario in which the entire public knows that he is, by all accounts, a horrible person, the entire public knows that he is being guaranteed the most money at the time in NFL history. The entire public knows that the Browns absolutely had to get this done to quiet the noise about how they haven't had a pure quarterback for a long time. And for Deshaun Watson to go out there and perform the way that he has is inexcusable. If you watch 2 snaps from yesterday's game, or I should say from Sunday's game against the Cowboys, Deshaun Watson looks like Will Levis. He looks like Daniel Jones, looks like rookie Caleb Williams. He does not look anywhere close to a top 5 quarterback, does not look close to a top 15 quarterback, doesn't look even remotely close to a top 20 quarterback. He is a bottom 5 quarterback in the NFL right now. And I just think about a Kevin Stefanski system that elevated Joe Flacco to be a playoff caliber signal caller last season. He walked off his couch, out of his living room into the Browns locker room and revitalized that team, made them into a playoff team, and guided them to be one of the best stories in the NFL last season. Deshaun Watson is a guy that was a top 5, arguably top 3 quarterback in the NFL just a couple of seasons ago, and he cannot adequately pilot this offense that, an aging Joe Flacco could do seamlessly. It makes no sense to me. The only explanation is that Deshaun Watson just doesn't have it anymore.